welcome to Step Into the Stories featured author segment for April. We're really happy to have one of our auto-buy authors with us this month. We're talking with Lauren Willig. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We're delighted.
This is going to be 30 minutes of gushing. So
on both sides.
Right. And you just finished a big sort of book tour thing. Like it seemed like you were everywhere the last 3 weeks or so.
I know. That's what it feels like. I'm still trying to remember what day it is and what city I'm in.
Right.
Well, you're home now, so congrats.
Yes,
I am home now and catching up on all of those emails you get from your kids' schools about chaperoning field trips. I'm like, I'm chaperoning a field trip this Friday. Who knew?
Right? Or I need to send in a permission slip with $10. I mean, no, sorry, the $10 thing is probably long gone, right? It's probably a lot more than that.
Or my daughter tries to persuade me it's more than that. It's like, no, sweetie, no.
Right.
Actually, apparently I have to do special snack this week for my son's preschool for Wednesday. So Tuesday night, I'm going to be baking.
Oh my goodness.
Are you baking anything good?
Well, the funny thing is, so I baked for a special snack. I can't remember if it was this year or last year. It all blurs, but it was right around Halloween. So I baked pumpkin muffins and apparently they were a big hit. So now my son has decided this is the de rigueur special snack. So apparently I will be baking pumpkin muffins, which I'm pleased with because they're easy. It's a one pot thing.
They're healthy.
Yeah, they don't require a special conveyance to carry them to school in.
You don't need to decorate them.
Thank God. I know. I used to do fancy Valentine's Day cookies with that icing, those little icing balls that get everywhere. And now it's just whatever. Here's a
muffins.
Paper Valentine I bought at Walmart.
Right. Don't miss those days at all.
I don't either. I don't either. So
we're going to be. Oh, I was going to say, so this month Lauren has a new book out, and I'm going to get it right. It's 2 Wars and a Wedding. I have all month called it 2 Weddings and a War. So I apologize. In fact, I talked about it on Barb's book review, and I said that we were going to be interviewing with it. And I get a note 2 seconds later from Donna. She said, it's 2 Wars and a Wedding, right?
maybe there should be a sequel, 2 Weddings and a War. It would be a very
kind of like that.
So it's kind of a prequel to Band of Sisters, which I adored.
Oh, thank you so much.
I adored that book. And it's a prequel, and it talks about Betsy Hayes, who was another Smith graduate, and she's the one that created the Red Cross group that went over to World War I. But she focuses on... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, she's the one who came up with the idea of the Smith College Relief Unit, which for people who haven't read Band of Sisters, this was World War I. It's based on a true story of a group of Smithies who went to the Somme at the height of World War I to bring humanitarian aid to French villagers. And there was a real Smith alumna who heard about this humanitarian crisis in France where Germans had destroyed whole villages, poisoned the wells, burned down the homes, and then sent the elderly and the very young back to the villages to starve and die. And this one Smith alumna heard about it, was like, whoa, not so fast, and got together a group of 18 Smithies, and they went out to the war zone to rebuild houses, provide education for the kids, cows for milk, chickens for eggs. I mean, you name it. They were rebuilding from the ground up. It was a crazy idea. The shells were falling. The Germans were about to invade. But this one Smithy was like, no, we got this. And she did. It was the most remarkable true story.
Yeah, what they did over there was really incredible. I mean, they made a lot of difference. And in the book, those who want to read it, it's very frustrating because they would no sooner make some headway than the Germans would destroy something again. But so this is kind of a prequel, and it tells the story of that woman, Betsy Hayes Hughes, last name. I remember
Hayes,
her married name,
right?
Oh, Rutherford, yes.
Rutherford. And she's the one that she founded it, but it talks about her life beforehand, where she was a classicist, and she was in Greece during the Greco-Turkish War, and then eventually went over to Cuba and served as a Red Cross nurse during the Spanish-American War. Correct?
Yes, exactly. Because I was really fascinated by the character of the founder of the Smith College Relief Unit. Sort of what could shape the sort of person who'd come up with the idea of throwing 18 American college women into a war zone. And so, of course, I started to read up on the founder and her youth. And I realized it was just as incredible as the story of the relief unit, that she had been enmeshed in 2 wars. And so a lot of 2 Wars and a Wedding is drawn from the life of this real woman, Harriet Boyd, who went to Greece to become an archaeologist and was told by the guys at the American School at Athens that if she wanted, she could be a classics librarian, but women don't dig. And so, in a fit of pique, she goes and she takes a Red Cross training course, which, by the way, she failed, but pulled strings. She had become friends with the Greek royal family because that was the sort of thing she did, and got sent to the front in the Greco-Turkish War, but then winds up, for some reason, going to Florida to join up with Clara Barden and the Red Cross in the Spanish-American War, before eventually going back to Greece and funding her own dig and proving that women actually can excavate. I was like, wait. Why does she go all the way back to the States? And why in the Real Woman's biography, there's really almost no mention of the Spanish-American War. There are these big gaps where that should have been. I kept thinking, okay, what isn't she telling us? What happened in Greece that led her to go to Cuba, and what happened in Cuba that she doesn't want to talk about? And that was the genesis of 2 Wars and a Wedding, was figuring out, what happened to this young woman, this idealistic young Smith grad who goes out into the world determined to make her mark, and then finds herself in 2 wars.
Yeah, and she was so idealistic in the beginning, and she's quirky. She's full of fire. She's sometimes not as responsible as she should be. She's a little immature and impulsive and a little bit self-centered, and I loved her anyway. But I have to say, as the story goes on and you see her character arc, I loved her even more. Like I just loved her. And I found that, like, I see this with a lot of your books where, the heroine, when you start out, or your main character, there are things like, they're always rootable. Like, I think you can always root for them, but then you just draw this great character arc where they grow so much and become this just full version of themselves. That's really, really great. And I'm not even sure I have a question about this. I just want to, right.
Well, I've noticed that a lot of your books also deal very much with female bonds.
Yes.
Like, if I go all the way back to the Ashford Affair, where it was the bond between the sisters, which to this day is one of my favorite books.
Oh my gosh,
because I just really love that one. And but that is, female bonding seems to be a very strong theme in all of your books, and this one too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I spent 13 years at an all-girls school, and so the ways in which women interact and form bonds has always been something that's fascinated me as much as romantic relationships, because these are foundational relationships in our lives. It used to drive me nuts that Disney heroines had no best friends. And I remember watching Pocahontas when I think I was in either in upper school or I had just started college, and she had a best friend. And this was so revolutionary because, oh gosh, I adored Judith McNaught novels back in the day. But those heroines, they were always so isolated. I wanted them to have other relationships in their lives. And so when I started writing my Pink Carnation series, even those were at their core romances, they were also very much about the relationships between the women in the books, because I've always been interested in the ways in which we support each other and hurt each other, that we're all imperfect, we're all idiosyncratic characters. And no matter how much you love someone, you're never going to entirely understand them because we don't entirely understand ourselves.
Right.
And so in these female friendships, there are times where we can be very supportive with each other, and times where we hurt each other by misunderstanding each other or because we're wrapped up in our own stuff. And 2 Wars and a Wedding really revolves around one of those sorts of things where my heroine Betsy and her best friend Ava, when their relationship works, it really works. But they have these, part of what draws them together are their differences. And so when they're both feeling uncomfortable in their own skin or their worst selves, those same differences that make them support each other and help each other wind up working against them, if that makes any sense.
It does.
It does. And I think too with Ava, like there were times I didn't like Ava. I thought she was a little harsh, But at the same time, sometimes you need that friend who's just going to tell you the truth, even though you don't like it. And I felt like that was what she did. And then when we got, so I have a question about that, because you have Ava in the first time period, and then you have Kit in the second, right? That fulfills that role, because Ava comes around, but like, that's not sort of the main female relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I wondered if you were ever tempted to combine those two characters into just one.
No, actually, the funny thing, so Kit is in the Cuba timeline. She's a female reporter who joins up with Clara Barden and the Red Cross, because female reporters weren't allowed to go to the war zone. Male reporters were. And Clara Barden had the genius idea of saying, okay, you can sail with me as long as you write articles about the Red Cross and do some nursing. So Kit, I hadn't planned her. When I was writing that first Betsy Cuba chapter, Kit just popped up on the scene, full blown. Every now and then that happens with a character, and it's always amazing. And she just sort of took over. And then I realized she played a really important role, though, because as you were saying, although there are times when Ava is not very good for Betsy, and Betsy is not very good for Ava.
Right.
But Betsy is a very strong character, and in some ways, often a divisive one.
Yes.
And so she's not someone who necessarily always makes friends easily. And so Ava is kind of her core friendship. And Kit, this female reporter who's a working mom and who's there to cover the Spanish-American War, she steps in and shows Betsy that there are other kinds of female friendships out there. Yeah. And so that, in some ways, I think the Betsy-Ava friendship, they will always be titular best friends, but a lot of the sort of warmth and support you need from a female friend comes from Kit in Betsy's life thereafter. And so, because often, you have the friends who are your best friend because they've been your best friend forever, but it's a difficult relationship. Whereas, I think Kit just brings a warmth to Betsy's life that she hadn't had before. And so it's two very different types of friendships, but that dovetail and, sort of all work out in the end.
Different friends provide different, or fulfill different roles too, right? Like I know even in our group of friendship, like with Barb and we have Renee and Shirley and Jenna, but we all fulfill different roles in our friendships, and it really, it's lovely. It's lovely.
Yes, exactly. And I love the way, especially in friend groups, people rotate and play different roles over time. I've also always been fascinated, and it's less so in this book, but with the way female friendships often exist in groups of 3.
It's true. That is true. You can have a larger group, but they do tend to have like a core trio.
Right, which can often start with like a linchpin friend with, 2 independent friends emanating off her. But then as the friendship group develops, those 2 friends can sometimes be closer or less close. Anyway, I love the dynamics of female friendship.
It is. And I'm sorry, my cat decided that she wants to play, so she's walking around in here too. A couple of my favorite scenes were actually that these women play really important roles in that they sort of show Betsy that there are other ways of breaking barriers besides her. Yes. We all know you know.
Breaking barriers.
She has a lot of needs. Attachment issues. They both, Betsy's very much a bang on the door and bang it till you knock it over. And both Kit and actually Ava in a way, but Kit and Ethel, there's a character who's a very minor character, but you bring in these women who show her there are other ways to break boundaries that aren't kick in the door types, that she has alternatives. And those were some of my favorite scenes when like Kit was saying, that she was willing to take the job writing about hats because she was at the newspaper that way.
Right.
As opposed to banging and insisting she would only write real news, which was what Betsy was doing, or Ethel telling her, at least I'm writing papers.
Yes, exactly.
So Betsy sort of comes to realize that maybe it isn't always kick in the door and demand.
Right. Although that is her nature. And, to some extent, I always feel like we're victims of our own characters, and most lives are tragedies or comedies of character in some way. And that she will never, although she's tempered by these friendships and by these experiences, her first impulse will always be knock down the door.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting if she were modern heroine, she'd be the same way, because I think that's kind of the atmosphere in a women's college. They are much more, I went to one too, and it's a much more different education where they teach you you're just going to go into the workplace and assume equality.
Oh, absolutely. I have to say,
a much different mentality. And I think that she probably absorbed a lot of that because you're around women just being equals, as opposed to being in a co-ed college, which didn't exist at the time anyways. But it's still that same mentality. She went to a school that taught her to be an equal.
It's a world where women are the measure of all things. And I certainly had that experience, coming out of 13 years in an all-girls school and then going to Yale. And I remember my roommate at one point saying to me, don't you notice that women never raise their hands in class? And I was like, what are you talking about? I talk all the time. And just, you automatically assume you're an equal, you're as good as the guys. And if the guys treat you otherwise, it's like, what is wrong with them? And I think that's definitely something. Yeah. So, and of course, in Betsy's case, it's augmented by the fact that she's an heiress. And so she's never had to worry about money or her future because she knows that she has that cushion there until, of course, something happens that makes her worry that her brother might cut off her trust fund. And then it's a whole rethinking of the world.
Yep.
Flipping that a little bit, there was one theme I wanted to ask you about. And because I think what really resonated with me with Betsy and also Holt is that you really work with the idea of shame and self-blame. And so, when we see, this is really hard for me to kind of articulate, but so you're
well, spoiling the book,
right? And your timelines are only 2 years apart. Yes. And you have the same main character, which I would expect from a craft point of view, the pacing might have been a little bit tricky in how you reveal things and how things develop. So first question is, was that tricky? Were there special challenges in that? And then did you always sort of have that theme in mind? Like, did you know that what was going to happen to Betsy, sort of that one incident that sort of led her to
the big secret,
right?
Yeah. I mean, this whole book revolved around the concept of what is the big secret. And so I didn't know going in, I didn't know exactly what the big secret was. But it became clear to me as I was writing the book, and this is what often happens. Like, I always feel like writing is like that Michelangelo poem about unearthing the statue that's already in the stone. You're not creating it, you're finding it. It was there, and your job is simply to set it free. And often I feel like there is a story I am trying to find. It's there. I just have to sound the right notes to, it's like echolocation or something. I'm trying to find my way to it. And it's already there waiting for me. And when you hit on those plot points that work, and you think, haha, this is it. This was the point I was missing. And so, when I first started thinking about the book, I did not know that the big secret was the big secret, but it became clear. It became clear fairly rapidly.
Dare I say you excavated it? I mean,
right?
Going to stay with.
Well, I think it's also it's very hard because once you've finished writing a book, that has become the version of the book it was always going to be. And sometimes you forget the false starts or the other things you thought you were going to do or include. They just sort of drop out of the way. Like one of my other books, The Summer Country, there was a whole set of alternate plot lines that were, or actually the Ashford Affair too, was supposed to have an entirely alternate plot line that was going to be running along with it. And it just dropped out for length reasons. And now it's impossible for me to imagine that initial vision of that book.
Right.
Because the way it turned out is clearly the way it always was. And so I feel a little bit like that about Two Wars I Wanged To. But I will say with the dual timelines, I think part of the reason I wrote it that way was because for me, it always revolved around that central question of why is she in Cuba? What brought her to Cuba? And so for me, it started in Cuba and was always a question of looking back, trying to unearth what had driven her there. But so I had this sort of crisis after I turned the book in. And people seem to love Band of Sisters, which is linear. And I thought, oh no, maybe I should have, it's only a 3-year time span. I should have written linearly. I called my editor, I called my agent. We had these long discussions about, what the difference was between writing a linear story and a dual timeline story, and whether this one should be linear. And in the end, what stopped me unpicking and rewriting it was Holt. Because Holt is, Betsy's male counterpart in the Cuba half of the story. And his voice is woven through the whole book that way. And I realized if I unpicked it and made it linear, I would have to lose Holt because it was lopsided.
He's a strong character.
He's very strong. And I mean, he, in some ways, I think he's a counterbalance for Betsy. He's much more likable in a lot of ways than Betsy is. And I think removing Holt, but I couldn't have Holt in only the second half of the book. It wouldn't have worked from a narrative standpoint. And I didn't want her love interest in the Greece half is Charles. And I didn't ever want to be in Charles's viewpoint, not because I don't like him. He's a perfectly nice guy, but he doesn't have the same weight in the story. And I think part of it is, Betsy has these two loves throughout the book, and Charles is your classic Gothic romance in a lot of ways. Those romances where you're always in the heroine's head. And so much of it is the heroine imagining the hero. And that in some ways, knowing the hero, seeing his thoughts and really being in his head spoils it, because it's about the heroine's imagination, what she's grafting onto this guy, as opposed to Holt, who's her real grown-up romance where they are equals in ways that she and her earlier love interest aren't. And so to be in his head and get his thoughts make sense. So anyway.
No, that actually makes perfect sense, because the first half of the book, she's very idealistic. So her love interest would be ideal, almost perfect.
And she's very naive. She's naive and thinks she isn't.
And so it works because that's how she sees him. She sees him as the perfect, ideal romantic hero, whereas Holt's much more human, and that makes much different sense. And I think much deeper in a way, and much more grown up. That's a good way to put it.
And because his conflict is similar to hers, I think sometimes Betsy grows because she sees that in Holt when she can't see it in herself, and vice versa. So I really liked how they played off of each other, and they both, there was a lot of healing in that especially in the last quarter of the book, really.
Yeah, I think they help to heal each other.
Yeah.
And when Betsy goes off to Greece, she's wounded, but she will not recognize or acknowledge that she's wounded.
Yeah.
Which is a very common thing. People are convinced that they aren't.
Yeah.
Well, especially with certain character types. And Betsy, it was interesting writing her because she's of the type that thinks a lot while very carefully avoiding thinking about anything that might impact her emotional state.
Yeah.
So switching gears slightly, there is a lot of information in this book. How much research did you have to do, and how long did it take you to research all of this?
Especially the archaeology part, like for me.
Archaeology, the Greco-Turkish conflict, the Spanish-American. I mean, there's so many details in here so clearly you had to have spent a long time immersed in a lot of this stuff.
I love, it's so funny because I knew nothing about I was chasing the real founder of the Smith College Relief Unit. I followed her down the rabbit hole to the Greco-Turkish War and the Spanish-American War. I knew very little. I mean, I knew nothing about the Greco-Turkish War. All I knew about the Spanish-American War was Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders. And mostly I knew that from having been in a high school production of Arsenic and Old Lace, where you've got that side character who's always running up the stairs shouting charge because he thinks he's Teddy Roosevelt at San Juan Hill. But so I love getting to immerse myself in areas I don't know anything about because it's all fresh and exciting and new. And you go in without preconceptions. Well, with some preconceptions. My preconception was that it was going to be really hard to research the Greece part and to figure out that world, and that the Spanish-American War, there's been so much written about it. I thought that was going to be a cakewalk. And it was the opposite. I wound up actually having a lot of material about the real woman's life in Greece. And so I was able to really, a lot of what happens to Betsy in Athens is very closely based on what happened to Harriet Boyd. And I have descriptions of these treks to Delphi and so on. And, down to the details of the inns where they stayed and the bed bug bites they were scratching. And so that was incredible. I mean, and there have been some really random works written about the American school at Athens. And so I had all of these details for that. And then the Spanish-American War, there's been a ton written about the battles and about Teddy Roosevelt, but almost nothing about the Red Cross nurses who went over there. Yes, isn't that surprising? I thought they'd be right there.
Right.
And I ordered because this is what I tend to do, is I go on an orgy of book buying when I'm starting a new book. And I ordered all of these monographs about the Spanish-American War. And you flip to, I read through all of them. But when you flip to the index and look for Red Cross or Clara Barton, nothing shows up. I mean, one had one line about Clara Barton showing up on the field at San Juan Hill, but nothing about the other nurses who were there, how they got there. And so, fortunately, I have a good librarian friend who unearthed all of these really obscure sources for me, because otherwise I was floundering, because I knew the nurses had been there, but I couldn't find them. Yeah. And so that was really hard.
Well, and it plays a big role in your book is they didn't want them there, which was very frustrating. Right. Every time I heard an Army guy say, "No thanks, we're good."
And part of the reason I know about it is because of those reporters, the female reporters who were also told they could not be allowed anywhere near. They weren't even in. The troops camped out in Tampa before being transported to Cuba. And the female reporters who went to Tampa were told they couldn't even visit them in the camps in Tampa because they would be disruptive. And so, but when Clara Barton took these women with her, they wrote articles back. They sent dispatches. And so I have their stories where they told these stories of showing up at the American hospital, where the men were lying on the ground covered in vermin and being told, no, their help was not needed. And I don't know about it.
Oh, it infuriated me. Yeah. Every time he said that, I was ready.
It's funny because the book that I finished is set in World War I and has a bluebird as one of the main characters. And one of the things that she deals with in the beginning is like how little nurses were actually able to do. And it was only what the doctors told you to do. And they didn't do procedures and whatnot. And then when it's said during the Halifax explosion, so when the explosion happens, that all changes. And so when we got to that part where they were telling the nurses that they were good and the doctors would do this and the nurses couldn't, and then she just started doing things anyway. And that's what happens when there's necessity, and it changes the landscape of the profession. Yeah. So I found that how she was treated by the doctors, and the doctors not so much. Like when she got aboard the Seneca, the doctors were actually much better. But those first treatment hospitals or field hospitals, it really made me so angry that they put that sort of ego above care of the patients. And so anyway, I just related to that because I had done a lot of research myself for, First World War nursing, and it was still the same thing.
And I feel like these things, it's never a straight line. It's cyclical, and that you see periods where women are being more admitted to the professions, their presence is being more welcomed, and then we go back again. Right. And I mean, that was the interesting thing about writing about Clara Barton in her 70s there in Cuba, because of course she'd been the Civil War angel of the battlefield, but the attitude really was that was in the olden days. It was fine back when medicine was primitive, but now that we've become more scientific, women, your primitive female forms of nursing are not welcome here.
I think it must have gone right back in the 30s, and it certainly went back in the 50s. I mean, and having friends who are nurses current day, there is still some of that where it's the making sure that you word something correctly.
It's so maddening. And I've heard the same about archaeology because, of course, Betsy is told women, do not have the temperament to excavate and so on. And I was looking at, there is a counterpart of hers at the American School in Athens in the 1920s who goes through the exact same thing that she does. I was being told by a friend that people are still facing that kind of attitude today, which is just mind-boggling.
It is. I cannot believe that we are at 30 minutes.
I know. We have so many more questions to ask you. This is so sad.
You know what? We should do it in the comments.
Yes, we will ask you some questions.
Right.
And I will pop up and answer them.
Yeah. I'm just so glad that we were actually able to get this sort of together between like your schedule and
Although I feel like I was the difficult one.
Like
No,
no,
I gave it a good try with difficulty.
like medical appointments and then me on the road and you were on the road. So I'm really glad that we finally got a
Me too.
chance.
I'm glad we were able to do this, and it was not from an Amtrak train with people shouting at me.
Right. Right.
All right. So before we go, though, two wars and a wedding.
You almost said it.
Two weddings, two wars and a wedding. It is out now. It is on shelves now. It's a great read. People should buy it, and then buy Band of Sisters because that was also good.
Yeah.
And
I love both of those books.
I'm going to be doing a read along because I wrote them out of order. And so I decided I really want to read them in order to see how they read when I go in the proper chronological timeline. So in the fall, I'm going to do a group read with my brain's gone. Two Wars and a Wedding in September. And I'll do a big book club Zoom with a special secret Smithy author co-host. And then another one in October for Two Wars and a Wedding. So if anyone wants, I'll have a sign up on my website for that. It's free. It's on Zoom, so people should join.
Lovely.
And before we go, we always ask, what are you reading now?
Yeah.
Actually, right now I am rereading these books I adored in grad school. I picked them up back in 1999 at the old Wordsworth in Harvard Square that's now gone. They're a series by a British barrister about an Oxford Don who likes to hang out with a group of young barristers, and they're always falling into scrapes, and he's constantly solving murders for them. They're hilarious. They're like, if Rumble of the Bailey weren't depressing and had murders, that's what these books would be.
The only way to describe it.
I mean, they're so much fun. There's nothing like it in the world. And sadly, the author died. So there will only ever be 4 books, but they were recently reprinted. And so when things like that makes you remember books. So I went and dug out my old copies, and I've been reading my way through the series. And so the one I'm reading right now, the author is Sarah Caldwell. The book is The Siren Sang of Murder.
I love that title.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. They're so fun. I highly recommend. Sort of quirky British barrister, British Oxford humor. They're so fun. The truth is, I spend a lot of time reading old mysteries because I find them very soothing, particularly when I'm working on a book. But I try to sort of balance them out with recent books. So in recent books, I just read Pineapple Street, which is kind of a slice of life about a wealthy Brooklyn family. A little bit, it's hard to think of a good comparative, but it's sort of light. I would say light Austen, but not really. I haven't quite figured out how to describe it yet, but it's sort of slice of life, wealthy family dealing with their own issues and coming to conclusions.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we have coming up next week, before we go, we'll just give a little shout out for next week's broadcast, which is our writing room. And our topic and that's Tuesday, the 25th, right? This is the 25th, this Tuesday at 7. And we're talking about kick-ass openings. So that's going to be our writing room. And then we have our featured author for May is jumping the queue a little bit and going to be right at the first of the month on May 2nd. For a very good reason, we're going to be joined by Jennifer Robson. And and her book Coronation Year. And so she's going to join us 3 days before the actual coronation. So we're going to have a lot of fun with that one. So
she's great. Everyone should come see.
I know. And I love Jen, and I've read everything that she's written. And so I'm really looking forward to having Jen on the show as well. So
I'm shocked she's not in England for the coronation after writing the royal family.
Right. But thank you, Lauren, so much for chatting with us today and for writing this great book, because I loved it. I especially when I got through that last half. I was on my Kindle, so I just kept swiping.
I was telling someone this morning, I said, sometimes it takes a little while to set the table, but then once you hit the midpoint of the book, you just sail through because.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for being here, and we will see everybody next time.
Marvelous. Thank you so much, everybody.